Hello, classes, sections of Music 133. This is your friendly neighborhood group of music theory nerds, and we will be here to talk about Unit 5. And it seems that we already have quite a few questions in Piazza, specifically about Creative Project 3. And some about Creative Project 2, so we thought we'd start with that. But before that, why don't we have the other professors introduce themselves? Oh, I'm Professor Wilcox, and if you don't know that by now, probably things have been difficult for you.
I'm Dr. McClellan, and yep, it's still the same old me. Sections 93 and 94.
And I'm Dr. Levesque, and I've been here the whole time also. No surprises.
So, yeah, should we just jump in on questions?
Yeah, there seems to be a lot this morning. I think everybody. Well, I guess we've had some answers for already, but we could just start right at the top. Hi, everyone. I am trying to complete CP3, and I'm really struggling. I have no background on music and have had a lot of trouble understanding the chords in the homework assignments. And I'm not sure what to do when the instructions are asking to represent chords. Does anybody have any tips? That would be great. Comes from Cassidy.
It's a great question. My first answer with that is always use the piano keyboard. Even if you don't play piano, it's a great way to visualize and find the chords, and then if you can find them on the piano, then you can figure out what the notes are and write down the notes. It's only half the battle, but it can be a big help if you're not already doing that.
And one thing I would add is that the chords that you're writing and the harmony that you're making is going to have to be related to the melody. I looked at one example that a student sent me where the melody notes did not match in with the chords at all. And what you want to remember is that for the most part, your chord tones, or rather the notes in your melody, are predominantly going to also be in the chords. So if you write a melody first, for example, and we haven't talked about the order to do this, but if you were to write a melody first, one of the things you would want to think about is what chord can I pick that fits in most with the melody that I have, with the chord tones that I've used in the melody. So just remember that there is a connection between the melody and the chords, and in some ways the melody is sort of a horizontal realization of a harmony. And so those will have to be related. So if your problem is picking the chords and figuring out which ones to pick, just remember that there is a relationship. So if you use a lot of C's, E's, and G's, for example, in your melody, then your chord is probably going to be made up of C, E, and G also.
Yeah, very good point. Maybe we should do a quick visual sample. Want me to share my screen? Or does anybody else want to? Happy to. All right, hang on. Okay, so here is CP3. I started to fill out some random stuff just as a demo, but I'm going to get rid of that. So, actually, okay, I was going to share a piano keyboard as well, but I think I'm not going to do that. So, just briefly, a really basic constructing a chord. I'm just going to leave this blank, and I'm going to use whole notes. And one thing that can help actually also is just learning how a chord looks visually. And chords always, at least for this course, or at least for what you're going to be doing, except for your inverted chord, but a basic chord is always going to look like this. You can think of it as stacked thirds. In other words, each note is 1/3 away from the next note, and so they're always going to be on all lines or all spaces, like so. And yeah, feel free to jump in as I'm sort of poking.
So I'm going to mention this, but I always think of building a snowman. So you go line, 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 with the whole note, it kind of looks like a snowman when you're done. And the reason, of course, that I regret ever mentioning that is because once I mention it, I've got that horrible song from Frozen in my head for at least 10 minutes afterwards. Because when you build triads, you are building snow in position. And,
Yes,
and now it's in all of your heads also.
How dare you mention that
You're
song?
welcome.
But it is actually very...
Hiding my head.
It is very... it is a good way to remember it, because this does look a little bit like that little guy from Frozen whose name I'm forgetting right now. So
like Sven or something, I don't know. Olaf.
Yeah. Olaf, yes, thank you.
I secretly love the movie. I can't hide it.
There are a lot of great things about it. So this is Olaf in C, and this is Olaf in G. And so once you built your, let's say you build your chord first, then you could write a melody. I didn't leave myself much space, but when you're writing your melody, just pick notes that are in the chord. So you have a C, an E, and a G. So in your melody, put a C, one of those three notes. So I put an E right here, and then I'm going to put a G right here. And then going to the next chord, well, really, there should be 4 quarter notes in this chord. So I'm going to squeeze them in. And actually, there's something wrong with that, which is that the stem direction is wrong. So I'm going to flip it. So don't be surprised if this is quite a painstaking process, because if it is, then you're doing something right. As you can see, just this little bit has taken me a few minutes. And my spacing is a little bit off, so if I were really doing this for a grade, I would move each of these over. And then now I have B, G, B, D, so I'm going to pick a B, which now fits into the G chord, and so on. And you can go forward like that. So I don't know if that is super helpful, but just as a really basic way that your chords and melody should look.
And we should mention, too, that you certainly can have notes that aren't in the chord. They're what we call non-chord tones. Mm-hmm. But as a general rule, you would never want to skip to or from a non-chord tone. So most of the time when you have notes that are out of the chord, they're moving by step between 2 notes that aren't in the chord. Right. So if you want to use a stepwise melody, you want to think, okay, I generally start in the chord, I step away from the chord, and then I step back into the chord. Yeah, that's if you are able to... And if you're able to play these, you'll hear that that is what ends up sounding the best. So, for instance, in the first chord, you could go E, F, G, and that F would be what we call a passing tone out of the chord. But you wouldn't necessarily start with the F on the downbeat, because that would be too strong of a pitch outside the chord.
So here's an example of a passing tone. This is meant to the second G right here is meant to line up with this chord, and then it passes through A on its way to B. And that's a very common thing, but the G and the B are both part of the chord, and that's very important that they line up like that. And what you wouldn't want necessarily, except in certain cases, is the A to be on the chord, because then it will clash right here. And people do that in music all the time, but when we're learning, it's good to keep things really clear and consonant on all the beats where you have the melody lining up with the chord. So that's a very long answer to the Piazza question, but I think it helps if you have a basic visual understanding of what the goal is, and then you know if you're generally on the right track. And this is kind of a rough idea of the visual that you're looking for.
We do ask them to do some inverted triads in
yes, so some of them will look like, so let me just do an inverted triad. I'm going to repeat my G chord, but I'm going to put the B on the bottom now, so it'll be in first inversion, and I just have to repeat the other 2 pitches, the G and the D, above that, and so I'm going to move the G up an octave, and I'm going to keep the D where it was on the middle line. And now you're going to have a chord that's not stacked thirds. It's going to have a 1/3 and then a 4th. So this is why it's really important to be solid on the previous units, especially intervals, because you need to be able to recognize when you have a third, when you have a fourth, and how those make up your chord, and then also know what the bass note is and whether the bass note is the same as the root note. And of course, in an inverted chord, that is not the case. They are not the same. But in a root position chord like these two, the lowest note, the bass note, is the same as the root note. But here the root note is at the top of the chord, the G, and the third of the chord is in the bass. So being really clear on all of those definitions. If you didn't understand some of what I just said, absolutely go back and review, because those are the most basic fundamentals of building chords and inversions.
One other thing is, if you're going to use a ledger line in one of your chords, as with any time else you use those ledger lines, you want to make sure on the score that you place them first, because they have a certain amount of they blank out what's underneath them. So if you place the ledger line note first and then place the other notes in your triad, you're going to have an easier time.
You just saw what happens if you do it the wrong way. So first I did the ledger line first and then the note. Then I put the note first and I'm adding the ledger line, and oops, I lose my note. Blame Dr. Wilcox for that one. Which, this is actually, having said that, this is actually a brilliant Flash tool that he built that we are all very indebted to him for. But you have to be careful with certain things like that to make sure that you get a good-looking result. Okay, so moving on, right?
Well, actually, while we're on the inversions of chords, I just want to show one thing. I'm going to share my screen for a moment.
Yeah.
Let's see. Okay, so one thing I want to mention is we talked earlier about the shape of the snowman, looking at the root position chord, and I've got a root position chord right here. One of the things I like to think about is looking for the gap is when I'm seeing first inversion and second inversion chords, and this is going to help you out in some of the homework assignments. But you can see how in a first inversion chord, which is this one, there's a gap up at the top between the top two notes. In the second inversion chord, there's a gap between the bottom two notes. And so gap, everything is even as root position, and the name of the chord, the root is in the bottom. Gap on the top is first inversion. Gap on the bottom is second inversion. And then as another short way of finding the root, you can remember that if there is a gap, the root is always on the top of the gap. So even though the bass note in every one of these cases is A, we have the root as an A, the root here is the F, and the root here is the D. And again, so that would be an F chord in first inversion and a D chord in the second inversion. Now that can cause you problems looking at that way, because if you don't have, for instance, a fourth here, if you've written a note wrong, then your chord is going to be wrong on multiple levels. But if the chord is written correctly, you can quickly tell what the inversion is, again, by looking for the space, and then what the root is by looking for the note on top of the space. And that's all I have there. Oops, am I still screen sharing?
No, I see you now.
Lose Robin? Okay.
I was muted.
Okay.
I was going to add that's a great example of how similar chords can look that actually are different chords. You had like an A chord and a G chord and an F chord, and on the page they all looked very, very close to each other because the notes were not that far apart. So you have to really examine them carefully to be sure you know exactly what you really have.
And just keep your eye on whether it's even or whether there are gaps. If it's even, line, 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 or space, 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 it's root position. But if there are gaps, you need to look to the gap to find out if it's first inversion or second inversion.
Mm-hmm. Yep, absolutely. Should we jump to the next question, which was CP3 blank? So we don't know what that person wanted. Kawai Tang, if you want to refine your question, please add something. Then the next one was, does the time signature like 4/4 go on both the bass and treble or just one of them? So we answered this in Piazza, but just briefly, I'll show that one. So mine was not complete. You do, I don't know if, I hope you can all still see this. You do need to put the time signature on both clefs, but actually, and I saw this a lot in Creative Project 2, and maybe we didn't make it clear enough, but I saw a lot of this where it was repeated on every single line. And when I say line, I mean both of these staves together as one line. We also call that a system, and you can tell because they have a joined bar line. So even though there's 10 separate lines happening, this is all one line of music, or what we call one system of music, and you can also tell from the brackets. So you don't want multiple time signatures in the lower in the second and third and fourth systems. You just want them on the first one. Yeah.
We have a good question here from Sharon, and the only reason I call it good is it's come in during the actual review. So let's hit that one. Is it okay to have dissonant chords in a measure for this project? Just to clarify, the rubric requires that each chord contains at least one note from the melody within the measure. In one of my measures, there is a C# minor chord in root position played with a D. She has two questions, so we'll start with that one. Is it okay to have dissonant chords? And we kind of talked about, the passing chords. So if you have a note that's outside the chord, you just want to make sure you approach it and leave it by step. That's generally the most pleasant way of doing that. Does anybody want to throw up the exact chord she's talking about? I see Robin messing around on the staff tool there.
Sort of building it just so people know what she's looking at. I don't know if she said whether it was an inversion or not, but I'm just going to make it root position. By the way, this is a minor point, but one thing that I would avoid is if you're building a chord with multiple sharps, don't put them right on top of each other like that. See, whoops. See how it's hard to see them? I would offset one of them, and that's very normal for music notation. So you're not breaking any rules. In fact, you're
C# minor.
Oh, sorry.
And root
in that
position.
case, we don't want this one. Even so, I would actually move one of these. Actually, there's complicated rules about how those look, but I don't remember them right now. But anyway, so that's a C# minor.
You better
chord.
get the book, Craig.
I was going to say, I'm not going to get that book again.
I probably got it
all
wrong.
the way on the other side of the room.
But it's close enough for our purposes. So basically, this is a C# minor chord with a D on hitting it at the same time. And I actually don't remember off the top of my head if we're forbidding that or if we're allowing it. Anybody remember?
I think it said at least one of the chord notes in the measure had to be in the chord. Is that what the direction said?
Yeah, I believe so. So I think that's fine. Yeah.
Right, as long as it resolves.
Yeah, and so here it is an example with it resolving. So it has the D, which is not in the chord, but it immediately goes to a note, the E, which is in the chord. So here we have the E and then the E. So that will sound pretty good as long as that happens. If you had a whole series of notes that were not in the chord, like D to F, actually, by the way, to be in the scale of C#, this should be a D#. Be in the scale of C# minor, and this should be an F#. But the point being that this would not be as preferable because it doesn't resolve to a chord tone. What was the second question?
Is it possible for more complex inversions to be more stable than simpler inversions? For example, I have a G# minor 7th, it's in third inversion, and an E major chord, and it's in second inversion. However, due to the context that the chord is in, I hear the more complex third inversion chord sounding more stable. Is this incorrect?
Wow, that was a very nuanced and complex question, and excellent question. What do you guys think?
Do you guys find different inversion chords sound more or less stable?
In I mean, second inversion chords are traditionally unstable. So in traditional harmony, second inversion chords don't exist unless they're subservient or in service of some surrounding more stable chords. So I'd say that traditionally chords past first inversion simply don't occur unless they have a justification. For instance, like a cadential 6/4, or what we call a passing 6/4, where a second inversion is in between two position chords. So I'd say in traditional harmony, second inversion is very unstable and really avoided in anything other than these subsidiary manners. And third inversion is usually pretty unstable also, because I'm getting way over some people's heads here, but in a third inversion chord, the seventh of the chord is the bass. And since the seventh of the chord is what we call a tendency tone, it has to resolve a certain way, then it adds a little bit of instability to the chord because the bass essentially has to resolve down by a step. So like I said, at least traditionally speaking, second inversion is very unstable, and third inversion is very unstable also. That may have been too in-depth an answer, and again, I'm talking about traditional harmony, not necessarily the harmony that you hear on the radio.
Yeah, I think the summary is that there's nothing particularly wrong with what you're doing, but it may be that both of those chords are unstable, and you want to be careful how you move away from them so that it sounds natural.
Yep.
And we have another question here from Sejong Lee. I'm butchering that, I'm sure. Do we have to use both the treble and bass clef as you've shown? I thought we only used one of them. Also, how do we draw a chord stem?
Oh, interesting. Do you want to take that one?
Well, we're suggesting for your chords that you use whole notes. So there's no stem involved. You just put down whole notes to fill the menu use 4/4 time. And yes, you do need to use both clefs. Your melody should be in the treble clef, and the associated harmony should be in the bass clef. So the answer to that would be yes. Yes, you need to use both clefs, and you don't need stems. Does anybody have a clarification on that at all?
I guess the only reason that would come up is if someone was writing in a time other than 4/4, right? So this would be an issue if someone decided to write in 3/4 or 6/8.
Yeah, but I think doesn't the assignment specify 4/4? If the assignment doesn't specify 4/4, then the stem directions. Which note do we follow for the stem directions?
You're right. You're right. It does.
Yeah, it does specify.
You're right. It does. It does say. Yeah.
Yeah.
But again, given the amount of creative project 2s I corrected that did not resolve leading tone tonic for the last two, people now be fully reading the directions. So a reminder does not hurt.
Very true. Yeah. So my 3/4 that I put in is misleading over here.
Yeah, you're a troublemaker.
Troublemaker. I love 3/4, but actually the fact that it's in the options is misleading. But we like to tempt you so that we really know if you're reading the directions. It's all part of our plan.
It's actually really complicated to remove elements. So I think I got lazy. I just not lazy. I just was more worried about the things I had to add than the potential.
The word lazy does not describe Dr. Wilcox.
No, overscheduled.
Yes, overscheduled. What should we do next? We
are here to review Unit 5, so maybe we should hit some of the most asked, most troubling bits of Unit 5.
Yeah. Should I jump into homework 26?
Jump away.
Okay. Yes, so identifying triads. One quick note, these large letters here are not the names of the triads, and that I don't know if people are confused about that, but if you are, just be aware that those are. Oh, look, I already filled out some answers. Heaven forbid. Those are just referring you to the answer boxes that you should fill in. But basically, these are just, you really need to know how to see a chord on the staff, and to identify it, you need to be able to identify the intervals within it. So you know up front that all the intervals are thirds, so the question becomes what kind of third, and then given what kind of third, then what kind of triad is it? And so as an example, I will give away an answer. This is a triad on D, and we know it's in root position because of the way it looks on the page and the fact that it's stacked thirds. Then we need to look at the interval from the D to the F and figure out what kind of third that is. And because it's a sharp, it's a major third. And then there's a minor third from F sharp to A, and therefore, and then you remember, in fact, you don't need to remember because we tell you right here, major third on bottom, minor third on top. That is a major chord, so you enter maj in the box, and that's how you do that one. I would recommend using the keyboard if you as a visual aid, and maybe I'll switch over my, I don't know if I can share my whole screen or just, hang on, entire screen, yeah, so this way I can just jump over to here. Can you all see?
We're just seeing you.
Oh, damn. Oh, because I haven't actually clicked share. What about now?
Now we're seeing Stephen.
Oh.
Okay, so what I'm hoping is that you'll see this
Soundtrap. There we go.
keyboard. Yeah, so this is Soundtrap, which is a free program, works in your web browser. It's handy. It's not required, but it's a very handy tool because you can basically have a free on-screen keyboard, which we also provide inside the course, but I'm just using this one because it's handy. So the point of this is that jumping from this chord over here to the keyboard, somebody's making loud noises. Oh, okay. Basically, you can find the chord on the keyboard, and this is a D major chord. You probably can't hear it, but if you were to have Soundtrap open, you can hear it. And that shows you that there's a major third here and a minor third here. So that can be a useful way to kind of poke around and orient yourself on these. Anything else to add there?
I apologize for chewing. I was having some late dinner there.
Oh, it's okay.
One thing I would actually point out too is that although it doesn't take the place of counting, you can use some visual cues in order to pick up the chords and to see what chords they are and what the qualities are likely to be. So let me just jump over that exercise for a moment myself. And I can show you exactly what I mean. Okay, can you see my screen?
Mm-hmm.
So I'm looking at, for instance, this first chord, and if I remember that major chords, the middle note is a half step higher than minor chords, then it makes sense that the middle note of a major chord would be either sharp or natural in relationship, especially in relation to the bottom note. So when I look at, for instance, these two chords, C and D, I'm still going to count, but my guess is going to be that they're both minor chords, because I can see that the middle note has been lowered in relation to the bottom note. Therefore, it is more likely that this is only 3 half steps to the minor third and not 4 half steps. Whereas A, I can see that the middle note is raised in relation to the bottom, so it is more likely to be 4 half steps than it is to be 3 half steps. So it's not a substitute for counting, but it can help guide you to the right answer if you keep in mind that looking at the position of the accidentals and relating it back to the bottom note will give you some information as to whether or not it's been raised or lowered in relation, which is going to, affect whether or not it's 4 half steps versus 3 half steps. So for the most part, when you get some experience, you can tell what the chord is without counting if you look at the shape and placement of the accidentals.
Mm-hmm. It's a great point.
Just let me unshare here. Okay, do you want to do some more of that one, or do you want to jump on to the next exercise?
Let's see.
Let's jump on.
Yeah, let's keep going. So this is page 2 of the same one. And it's really kind of a different way of looking at the same task. You just need to fill in the accidentals that you need to make the chord a certain type of chord. And so I think if you can do the first page, you can do this page. Is there anything we should add there? Sort of like going the other direction.
Just as you said, the keyboard is very helpful.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, it can also help. I don't know if this could be considered cheating, but ultimately music is about sound, so I think it kind of is fair enough that if you can play the chords on a piano, most people can, even if you don't have tons of musical training, most people can hear the difference between a major and a minor. Don't rely on that 100% because you need to be able to see and make sure from the notation, but you can get a sense. If it sounds bright and happy, it's probably major. If it sounds kind of dark and sadder, it's probably minor. But then diminished chords also sound kind of very similar to minor chords, and then augmented chords just sound weird. So you can get a little disoriented that way too, but it's another resource that you can draw on if you need to. Maybe jump to 27.
Yeah, I've got 27 pulled up if you want me to go.
Yeah, go for it.
Okay. So here with 27, what I think gives people the most problems with this one is figuring out what the harmonic function is. So we start here and we're in A major. The first thing remember that is now all of our labels are going to be relative to A major. So tonic will be an A chord, supertonic a B chord, median to C sharp chord, subdominant to D chord, and so on. One of the things that students sometimes do is they keep this tonic as C mentality, but remember the tonic is the first note of the scale, and it also refers to the chord that is built on that first note. So if we look at the first chord, A, the type is going to be major, and I know that for two ways. Number one, I know it because D to F sharp is a major third and F sharp to A is a minor third, but I also know it because I recognize that this chord is subdominant, and I know that the subdominant in every major key is major. And that's the harmonic function part of it. So we have major followed by subdominant, and I got subdominant because D is the fourth step of the A scale. B, the type here is going to be minor, because B to D is a minor third and D to F sharp is a major third. And since B is the sixth step of the, it's the second step of the A scale, then I know it is going to be supertonic. So that's fairly straightforward in major. What gets tricky is when we go over to the second page when we have minor, because minor has these pesky accidentals. And hopefully you know by now that the accidental is the raised seventh step of the scale, and we also have the subtonic first leading tone issue. So I'm going to look at the first one, and I'm glad this one happened to come up. We're in B minor. The seventh, A is the seventh step of the scale because it's raised. That means the harmonic function of this is leading tone. If this were an A natural, it would be subtonic. A sharp to C sharp is a minor third. C sharp to E is another minor third. So we have a diminished chord right here on the leading tone in minor. B would be a dominant chord, and that's F sharp major. Let's jump down, try one more. Here we go, G minor. Okay, A, D to F sharp is a major third, F sharp to A is a minor third, so this is major. Because it's built on a D and that's the fifth step, this is dominant. And this is a great example with B. Now B is the seventh step of the scale. It's unaltered. makes this an example of the subtonic. F to A natural is a major third, A natural to C is a minor third, which makes this major. So there's two steps to this. One is identifying the root note of the chord. These are all in root position, which makes it a little easier. And then relating that back to the key to get the function. And the second part of that, that's listed first here, is figuring out what the quality is by looking at the sequence of half steps and whole steps. Okay. Anything you want to add? We have dead air.
Sorry, I was muted. Can you hear me?
Oh, no. Yes, I can hear you now. Anything you want to add to that?
I don't think so, unless there was a second page. I can't remember for that last one.
I think you showed the second page.
Oh, okay. All right.
Yeah,
cool.
that was the minor examples.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I was moving on to the next one, so I got distracted. Yeah, should I do 28?
Well, it's up, so.
It's up, so here it is. So basically, we sort of talked about this before with relation to Creative Project 3, but and I think what Dr. Lebec pointed out about the way of visualizing inverted chords is really valuable. So there's, instead of the stacked thirds that you're getting with the root position chords, now you're always going to have this little gap, which is a fourth. And it's a great rule of thumb and a way to remember it that the root note, sorry, I almost said tonic, but I mean the root note of the chord is always above the gap. So this is a G chord, this is a D chord. You could just go through them just like that and immediately know what the chord name is. This is a C chord, D flat, and D. And then the question becomes all the other stuff of major, minor, augmented, diminished. And what I recommend doing for that is to put the chord into root position in your mind or on a piece of scratch paper. In other words, in this case, take the note that's separated by the little gap of a fourth and move it an octave, in this case down, below the other two notes so that it goes into that nice stacked third position. You could even do it in your head if you're comfortable with that. If you're not 100% confident, I would do it on paper so you can really see it. And then you can count the intervals within it and know what kind of chord it is, just as you did with the other assignment. So it's sort of like that one little step lets you do this assignment the same way you did the previous one, if you just get it into root position first. In this case, I would move the note, the A, up an octave so that it puts it into that stacked thirds position. And then the inversions, you just have to, there's two ways to do it. I would probably recommend just memorizing them, that if it's first inversion, which means that the gap is at the top, like this one, then it's going to be 6-3. If it's second inversion with the gap on the bottom, it's going to be 6-4. But it can also be useful to literally just remember what these numbers mean. And they're actually incredibly basic in a certain sense. 6-3 is the intervals above the bottom note. So you have a sixth up to here and a third up to here. And a 6-4, you have a sixth again and then a fourth. So that can also help you. 5-3, of course, is the root position version, which I can just tell you right now, there are none on this page. Page 2. So I think this is sort of the same task, right? So again, you basically so this one starts to mix in some root position, so you have to just be on the lookout for that. So again, put it into root position, figure out the type, put the inversion 5-3, 6-3, or 6-4, and so on. And that, if you're comfortable with that, you should be just fine. So let me just do one of these really quickly. This chord right here, which is, wait, I'm confused by our own assignment. Let me do chord chord B. So I'm going to move the C up here down into the lower octave, so then I have C, E, G, and I know that that's a major chord, so I'm going to put maj, and then the inversion, it's a sixth and then a third, so I'm going to put 6-3, or I can look at it and say the gap is at the top, so that's first inversion, and that's always 6-3. So I think that's it. Who's up next?
I can do the last one here. 29.
We
Share.
do have another question about placement of ledger lines on the tool. And my suggestion is if you have continued problems about it, always place the ledger line and then pull a fresh note off the palette and place it. But if you do have further issues with it, contact Professor Wilcox. Contact me about this, and I'll see if I can resolve that for you individually. And my email or my contact information is in Piazza. So.
Okay, so I guess I'll go ahead and do exercise 29.
Sounds great.
Okay, so exercise 29 is basically more counting, which is one of our favorite things to do in music theory. But instead of counting triads and building them that way, now we're going to be counting up to dominant seventh chords and diminished seventh chords. So if you look at the exercises, we're given a root note, in this case B, in this case flat, and we need to add accidentals to create the proper set of intervals. So a dominant seventh chord is going to be 4 plus 3 plus 3. That's a major third, a minor third, another minor third, and that's what gives us our major triad with the minor third on top. So this first example, from a B, a major third up would be D sharp. A major third up from D sharp would be F sharp, and a minor third up from F sharp would be A. So the third needs a sharp, and the fifth needs a sharp, but the seventh does not. So here's the mistake that everybody is going to make on this, that everybody makes. You'll go from B to D, and you'll say, oh, B to D, that needs a sharp, let's make it D sharp. But then when you go to count up a minor third, you'll count from D natural instead of the newly added D sharp, which would give you an F as the minor third above D, instead of the F sharp as the minor third above D sharp. So remember that you have to start from the bottom up with these exercises, and you have to count from your altered note as you proceed further up. Just to do one more quick one, that's the same one. Oh wait, this is the same one repeated for reference. I can read. So we have D, a major third up would be F sharp, a minor third up from F sharp is A, another minor third up would be C, and that gives us our 4 plus 3 plus 3 pattern. The second page is fully diminished seventh chords, I believe. Yes, so a diminished triad with a minor third on top, that's going to make these all minor thirds. But it's the same basic exercise. You count up 3 and you alter the A. In this case, it's an A natural. 3 more gets you to C natural. And then 3 more on top of that would get you to E flat. So the only accidental needed in this particular exercise would be an E flat or a flat on the seventh chord. So these exercises are pretty simple. All they involve is counting to 3 and counting to 4. Just remember that you're always counting from the altered note once you've changed it, and not from the version that you're seeing on the page. It's very easy to look back and say, oh, what is 3 half steps from F, forgetting that you've actually changed that into F sharp down on here. I think that's it.
Sounds great.
Yeah, I think we've hit everything that we were needing to hit, and we've answered all the questions that are currently in Piazza, but don't forget you can continue to ask questions if you have them, either in Piazza or directly to your instructor. So is there anything else we want to say? I know Professor McClellan and I, or at least I am still grading Creative Project 2 because there are a lot of them, and everyone has done a very extensive job documenting their analysis, which I appreciate, but it is making things take a little bit longer. And we'll be moving on to Creative Project 3 imminently. So
I finished my Creative Project 2's done.
Oh, you put me to shame here. Did you spend the whole day doing that?
Yes, I did.
Yeah.
And the previous most of the day.
Oh, the whole 2 days, two whole days of grading.
Well, mostly. Most of 2 whole days.
Yeah, I've got another deadline which is slowing me down a little bit. I'm about more than halfway through. So
I feel bad. I've got 1/3 of the number to correct as you guys do. So
yeah, it's brutal.
We should hire him anyway.
I only had 50 to do last time.
I have
You guys are
about
probably like 180 or so.
yeah, I have 180, and it's something you just have to do it every day, and so.
Yeah, and they are very good. I've been impressed with the work students are doing. So
Yeah, the quality is quite high, so that's good. And most people are doing very well. I mean, it's really if you're following the instructions, you're doing fine. So.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can I share something totally off topic? It is related to music.
Oh, okay. As long as it's related to music.
It's called the Groove Pizza.
Oh, that does sound off topic.
Kind of hungry, so.
Well, who doesn't like pizza?
Screen? So this is a really fun toy, and the way it works is that, can you all see it? Basically, you press play, and you can't hear what I'm hearing, but basically each little dot, if you click a dot, it will play a rhythm on that dot, and so you can just create these funky patterns, and it will play a really cool rhythm. So that's all.
Yeah, we hear it.
Oh, you
Yeah.
We
can
can actually hear that a little bit.
Yeah, we do hear it.
Oh, let me unplug.
Make us a funky pattern.
Yeah. Anyway, you got the idea. It's fun to play with, and it goes back to unit 2 and rhythm if you want to just work more with rhythm.
Yep. That's funky fresh there, Adam.
Yeah.
Well, thanks everyone for listening. On behalf of myself and the pizza makers,
I'm gonna go
I
have
wish
dinner
you
now.
all a good day. I'm going to go have breakfast here in Taiwan. So I will.
Have you told everyone where you are?
I think we mentioned it last time. I'm in Taiwan, and now it's nice and bright and hot. You can tell it's going to be a nice hot day here. It alternates between being extremely hot and pouring rain, so it's kind of fascinating in that respect. But I'm enjoying it.
Cool.
Yep.
Well, it's beautiful springtime on the East Coast.
Oh, springtime's nice.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, wishing you all a good day, and signing off.
All right. Good night, everyone.
Good night.